This is Dr. Peter Attia. He will tell you how to live longer. This is Andrew Huberman. He will tell you how to live smarter. Jordan Peterson will tell you how to live wiser. And Gary Brecka will tell you how to live a life of total wellness. All of these world-famous health professionals will tell you many reasons why you should be doing what they advise. But after listening to countless of their podcasts, I have yet to hear any one of them mention the actual one reason that it matters above all else to follow their advice. And that reason is you. Real quick, this is the second part of my two-part video. The first part of the video was from last week about 5 ways to not die in the hospital. I left that video on a cliffhanger, and if you haven't seen that video yet, I'll link it right here. Check that video out first and then come right back. And for those who did watch that video regarding the cliffhanger at the end, I'll address that in just a second. To fully understand a critical piece of information these health professionals are leaving out, you need to hear about a patient encounter I had from a few years ago. It was about an elderly gentleman. He was in his late 70s. He was living at home by himself. He got up from the couch to walk to the kitchen. While walking to the kitchen, his feet became entangled with his little dog. He fell to the ground, broke his hip, and he ended up in the emergency department. His first hip surgery didn't go exactly according to plan, and he ended up needing a revision a few days later. That surgery unfortunately also had complications, and the whole thing turned into, unfortunately, what should have been a 2 or 3 night hospital stay to a 2 and 3 week hospital stay. During this time in the hospital, he became deconditioned, and when everything was done, he was subsequently transferred to a skilled rehabilitation center. Here's where things really took a dive. After 2 weeks in the rehabilitation center, his family received a notice that his insurance wasn't going to pay for this facility anymore. The patient unfortunately couldn't afford the out-of-pocket expenses to stay in the center. He was then discharged home. He was still deconditioned. He had not returned anywhere near to his prior mobility status. His family couldn't take care of him. He couldn't take care of himself in the home, and he ultimately ended up right back in the emergency department. Here I can show you documentation of a completely different case, but a similar scenario where an elderly patient who just suffered from natural deconditioning had recurrent falls in her home, ultimately ended up in the emergency department. Her insurance wouldn't pay for rehabilitation. She was unable to afford the out-of-pocket expenses. She was ultimately discharged home, and it will only be a matter of time before she falls again, suffering potentially a more life-threatening injury in the near future. The point of these stories is it illustrates the most important reason the health gurus are omitting online when talking about living a healthier life. And that point is when the time comes and you truly need it, unfortunately, you are not going to be able to afford the health care that you need. Even if you have insurance, you can see it from the first patient encounter that I mentioned in the video. I see it all the time. Insurance stops paying for the care that they need. They are ultimately discharged back home in a condition that is only marginally better than what they presented with in the hospital in the first place, and the cycle just repeats itself. So for closure about the last video's cliffhanger on the 5 ways to not die in the hospital, the 5th way is to stay healthy so you ultimately don't need to be in the hospital, but it's not the reason that you think. It's not to stay healthy so you can live longer, be active, and have an overall more rewarding lifestyle. You can easily argue the most important reason to stay healthy is you're just not going to be able to afford the health care. Don't just take my word for it. Listen to these patient encounters. Look at the news talking about the significant healthcare cost burden on families and how many families ultimately end up in bankruptcy because of healthcare costs. Modern medicine is very good at treating bacterial illnesses, trauma. There are even significant strides in cancer treatments over the last few years, and there's a lot of promise on the horizon. But it remains woefully inadequate in treating diseases of prosperity like diabetes, hypertension, complications from obesity. And in one of my next videos, I'm going to highlight one of the main reasons that is. So be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.